Chess YouTube, we have to talk about this game right here. Magnus Carlsen playing as black versus the Indian prodigy Arjun Erigaisi in the final round of the 2025 Norway Chess Tournament. He goes for the King's Indian defense in Armageddon, and white goes e4, the main line. This game was insane. No one plays the King's Indian defense at the highest level these days, but that is just Magnus Carlsen for you. But let's go back to the very beginning here. On the first move, Arjun, 1d4. He's mostly playing 1d4 in this tournament. Black goes knight f6, then c4, and here almost everyone these days plays e6, intending a Nimzo Indian or a QGD. Instead, Magnus going g6, a move almost no one is playing anymore. All right, knight c3, and then black's two main moves are d5, the Grunfeld, and bishop g7, the King's Indian, and black does go for the King's Indian. Now we have e4 and d6. All right, this is the main starting point of the King's Indian defense, and you know, if you geek out about opening theory, here's a quick overview. White nowadays has three main ways to get a big edge versus the King's Indian. First of all, there is the classical with knight f3, intending bishop e2 and castles. That is one way, the oldest way. It's very, very good. But white also has these two modern ways to get a very dangerous game versus the King's Indian. The first one is h3 followed by bishop to e3. That setup is incredibly strong. There's also the one Arjun played in this game, bishop e2, intending a fast bishop to e3. All right, from here, Magnus, knight bd7 is the move. This is very important. He's going knight bd7 before castles, and the idea is he wants to go e5 immediately before castling, and if white goes d5, then knight c5 is the move, pressuring e4. We're going to see all of this in just a second. It's sort of a modern idea. It's not necessarily stronger than castles, but it is a modern twist. All right. From here, Arjun, bishop e3. I don't know this opening has a name. I've seen it called the Karpov variation on chesspublishing.com. I'm going to call it the Karpov variation, but I really don't know what the name of the opening is. If you do know the name of this setup, let me know down below. I'm very curious about that. And by the way, in case you're curious, why is white putting these two bishops here before the knight? What is the idea? Well, first of all, you're putting the bishop here on e2 before bishop e3, as if black goes knight to g4, obviously you can just take the knight. That is why you would do this instead of an immediate knight f3. If you go, say, bishop e3 and then knight f3, black can always go knight g4, harassing your bishop. So by leaving the knight on g1, you maintain defense of g4 and therefore allow a fast bishop e3 without the bishop being challenged. But the other idea behind this is really important. White here has good control of the h5 square, and that means in a lot of lines, white can go for a fast h4 and then h5, attacking on the king's side. He can also go for a fast g4, g5, or h4, h5. This is kind of the idea of the opening, putting these two bishops here and intending fast pawn moves on the king's side. All right, from here, black goes e5, counterattacking, white goes d5. This is actually not the strongest move here. The strongest move is actually knight to f3, transposing to basically a Gregoric variation of the King's Indian. Instead, d5's played, and Magnus jumps in with the knight, knight c5. Again, this was the key idea behind the fast knight bd7 before castling. And now this pawn on e4 is under attack, and white has to find some way to defend. Do you want to go f3? Do you want to go queen c2? In the game, queen c2 was chosen a good move, and the benefit of this over, say, f3 is white now has the option of castling long immediately if he wants it. All right, Magnus, a5 is the move, a typical King's Indian defense move, cementing the knight on c5. Of course, there are no b4 ideas now. And here Arjun, he's got to find a plan. How do you want to continue? Well, according to the engine, and by the way, this is very consistent with this sort of opening for white, the way to go is actually some combination of long castles and h4, intending an immediate h5. Again, just attacking immediately on the king's side. Instead, Arjun goes for a slightly more quiet idea. Knight to f3. He spent only a few seconds here, so clearly he thought this was the way to go. And from here, the knight may actually go to d2 at some point, bolstering the defense of these pawns here. All right, Magnus, knight g4. He quickly jumps into the g4 square. And again, this is kind of why you have the bishop on e2 in this line, guarding g4. But Magnus Carlsen's fast e5, fast knight c5, forces queen c2, forces the queen off the d1 square. And suddenly, Magnus here harassing this bishop on e3 like this. All right, Arjun. you typically want to go forwards or backwards with this bishop in this position. He goes forwards, bishop g5, black goes f6, driving back this bishop. We go bishop h4, then g5, and bishop g3. This is a common sort of scenario in certain lines of the classical variation, of the Gregoric variation of the King's Indian defense. Overall, it should be roughly level, but it is certainly an imbalanced position. All right, Magnus. He plays the standard King's Indian move here, f5. That is why you play the King's Indian defense to go e5 and then f5. And from here, black is threatening f4, sort of a modified version of the Noah's Ark trap, trying to trap the bishop on the g3 square. All right, how is Arjun going to respond? Well, a move like h3 is kind of passive. Instead, Arjun plays a more active move, knight to d2. This is super interesting. All right, what's going on here? Isn't white just losing the bishop to f4? Isn't he? Well, turns out no, he is not. f4 is the move, and here Arjun finds a very strong way to save the piece. He takes on g4 like this, black takes, and then f3, the intermediate move. The point being, you attack the bishop. If the bishop goes back, you slide back to f2, and all is well. And that is what happens. We have bishop d7, and then bishop to f2. And Arjun, he traded off his light squared bishop, but with this sort of pawn formation, all the pawns on light squares, you don't really need your light squared bishop. It's not doing that much. So Arjun trading off his bad bishop for a knight, not the worst trade. And by the way, back here, if black takes on g3 like this, white simply takes back, and white suddenly has decent attacking prospects on the king's side. So overall, Magnus here, he made the better move. Bishop d7 was the way to go for black right here. All right, Arjun, bishop f2 is the move. He slides back, and now we have this weird position with these competing pawn chains where white may castle actually on the queen side, and black may actually castle on the king side. And from there, both sides can sort of attack on either side of the board. All the rules here are being broken in terms of where you attack, where you castle, and so on. All right, from here, black, b6 is the move, bolstering this knight. The idea being, if you take on c5, black takes back with the d-pawn right here. All right, in response, we have b3. Why do you go b3? Well, white here, he may want to go a3, then b4, but if you go a3 right away, then a4 could be a strong response, clamping down on b3. And if white ever goes b4, black takes on b3 en passant. That would ruin white's pawn structure and his attacking chance on the queen side. So b3 here is played with the idea of going a3, then b4. And if black ever goes a4, you can go b4 in response and not lose that pawn to the en passant move. All right. Now, black here, g4, is going for it on the king side. White castles long, and black goes rook to g8, lining up the rook on the soon-to-be open g-file. Now we have king b2. Arjun getting a little fianchetto square for the king. Now we have g takes, knight takes, and then bishop to f6. Now rook hg1 defends the pawn. Of course, black here opens up the attack of the rook on g2, and the rook on the g1 square does defend. Now black, bishop g4 is the move. Now we have a3, gaining space. Queen to d7, and then knight b5. The knight jumps up. Now we have king to e7, and then rook d to e1, defending e4 in advance with the rook. Therefore, the queen now has more squares it can go to kind of, free up some space here. All right, black, rook g7 is the move. Then we have knight to d2. The knight drops back, and then king to f7. The king slides over. Then g3, Arjun trying to open up lines of attack on the king side now. We have bishop h5, the bishop goes back. Then we have some pawn trades. G takes and then e takes. And of course, with e takes, the king on b2 is now under check. It's got to go somewhere. Where does it want to go? It goes, well, actually, it doesn't go anywhere. We have bishop d4. So far, Magnus is playing a really terrific game of chess in this Armageddon game. He's kind of playing for a win despite being Armageddon, which is just kind of how Magnus plays these days at either color. Regardless of whether he just needs a draw or not, he's typically playing for a win. All right, from here, what should black be doing? Well, it's kind of a delicate position. The computer says taking on g1 is the way to go here, intending rook takes and then rook takes. But instead, Magnus, he goes for a different idea. Queen to h3. Okay, very active. He slides down with the queen, but it turns out this move here is a little bit dubious. It's not the best idea. It gives white some really terrific attacking ideas. On Arjun, he just pushes forward. He takes on f6 like this. Now here, Magnus decides it is time to take on g1. If you don't, if you go, say, king takes, then white can always take on g7, go rook g1, continue the attack, and so on. So instead, black here takes on g1. Rook takes g1, a good move. White takes back, and then we have king takes. However, here in this position, white has a number of very, very dangerous ideas. First of all, you can just take on c7 and win this pawn, and then you're up material. That is actually the strongest move here. You can always go back to, say, b5, then c3 later, defending, and your king is really, really safe on b2 with this kind of giant mass of pieces and pawns defending it, whereas black's king is very, very vulnerable here. The move Arjun played in the game, though, is a little bit different. e5. Now, this move might not be technically as strong, but it's much more dangerous, and it gives black the chance to make a serious mistake. Now, what should black be doing here? What's the idea? Well, this move e5, it's a clearance move. You attack the king, you kind of force king takes or d takes or the king going back or something, but you also open up the line of attack with the queen on the pawn on h7. So this is a really difficult position for black, and Magnus here, he actually blunders. He makes such an astonishing mistake in this position that is just completely unlike him. He takes on e5 with the king. King takes e5. Magnus here, he's gambling. He's saying the king might actually be safer in the center of the board as, you know, the knight, the queen, the bishop, and so on all kind of defend the king here. But this is a huge mistake. Instead, the move here was d takes e5, defending like this, intending something like queen takes, then bishop g4, maybe going here and so on, blocking the g file. And black here is technically hanging on. You can push these pawns down and so on. Instead, though, in this position, he takes on e5 with the king. All right, this move, not the best. And here Arjun, he just takes on h7. And now the king is sort of being cut off. White here controlling these lines here. The knights are potentially jumping in really, really soon. And look, the king here is just in the center of all of these attacking ideas. And beyond that, the white king's actually pretty safe on b2. So white here objectively gets a dangerous attack, but also from a practical standpoint, like this is not the kind of scenario you want to defend as black. Finding the right move here as black is like ridiculously hard. All right, the computer here actually says knight to e6, giving up this knight is the best move. That just shows you how bad his position is. If you don't play that, you're going to be in trouble. But no matter what, you're kind of losing here. All right, Magnus here, he tries to defend with the move bishop g4. We saw this move in other lines. The idea is you cut off the g file. Maybe you go bishop to f5 soon, attacking the queen, controlling this diagonal, and so on. I can draw arrows correctly. But it's losing in like 2 moves. If you like puzzles, pause the video and try to find the 2-move checkmate that Arjun Erigaisi has right here in this position. Arjun, he gives the check on g7. Now, where is the king going to go? It's almost no squares. You can't block the attack. You can't go here. You can't go there. You can't go here. You can't go there. The knights control those squares. The only move here is king to f5. And now Arjun, he brings in the knight. Knight d4. And get a load of this. It's checkmate. The queen controls these squares. The pawn controls this squares. The queen controls these squares. The knight controls this square. And this knight delivers the checkmates. What a beautiful finish to this game. Magnus, I mean, his King's Indian defense, it paid off in the opening and the middle game, but ultimately, in the long run, Arjun was just too strong in this game and ended up finding a way to win the Armageddon game when it mattered most. Wow, what a game between Arjun Erigaisi and Magnus Carlsen in the Armageddon game of round 10 of the 2025 Norway Chess Tournament. Of course, Magnus still won the tournament. He still played well enough to win the entire thing on his home turf. Hopefully, this was not his last classical chess tournament. We still love seeing Magnus play these tournaments. I think Magnus is just a little bit of a sore loser at times. He doesn't lose very often in classical chess, which is why it's so tough for him potentially. But he still played well enough to win the entire tournament. So, a well-deserved tournament victory for Magnus, but also a well-deserved victory in this game for Arjun. But, who do you guys like more, Arjun or Magnus? I'm kind of torn on who you guys will like more. I know I have a lot of Indian chess fans in my community. So, type a big Arjun to support Arjun in the comments, or Magnus to support Magnus. And while you're at it, if you want to support this channel, the best thing you can do, just smash that like button. It does so much for helping this video reach so many more people. So again, to support the community, smash that like button. And as always, I wish you the best of luck in your chess improvement journey in 2025 and beyond. And I'll see you in the next video.